For the younger generation, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Darren Chan. I practice Kyokushin or karate, and I've been doing that for about 38 years.
Okay. What made you choose Kyokushin?
I chose Kyokushin later on in my career, or in my karate career. I actually started in a style called Jutsu Kai, which was an offshoot of Kyokushin. There was a chap called Bernard Cretan that was a bit of a legend in Kyokushin days in the late 70s. And he broke away from the BKK and formed his own startup. So although it's called Jutsu Kai, it was Kyokushin with a different badge on. So when he moved to Denmark and things sort of slowed down a little bit in terms of Jutsu Kai here, I found myself going into Kyokushin where it all started and began.
When did you make the crossover and who was your first Kyokushin instructor?
When I decided to follow Kyokushin path, my instructor from Jutsu Kai at the time, the area instructor, Rick McElroy, had just been beaten by a guy called Michael Thompson that many Kyokushin practitioners would know. And at the time, as a young kid, I found myself worshipping Rick McElroy, and he was the man, and I just saw this man beat the man. And I thought, well, if that's the man beating the man, who's that man? So I found myself asking a lot of questions about Michael Thompson, and then carried on following his career. And obviously Felix Tamaza came into that picture as well. So it was always my intention to go to Crystal Palace, follow Felix, and hopefully meet Michael Thompson, which happened. And I ended up training first of all with Felix and Michael Thompson.
And how long ago was that? Can you remember the years?
When I crossed over and started in Kyokushin and followed into Crystal Palace with Felix and Michael Thompson, it was 1997, 98. So I was about 20 when. So I'd been watching the knockdowns, you know, the Britishes at Crystal Palace, and then around about 20 years old, I made that jump going to Crystal Palace and finding those guys. In actual fact, I was doing door work and met Felix on the door, and that's how that started. So randomly, it's a small world, and I met him on the door.
In your opinion, what difference has Kyokushin made to your life?
Karate and Kyokushin mean so much to me in terms of, you know, my life. So a lot of people won't understand. So without sounding horrible, like people like my wife or people around me that don't do karate or practice karate don't sometimes understand, don't get that feeling that you get with karate, the camaraderie, the feeling of a family, and it's another family outside of your immediate family. You know, you grow up with people in karate from a young age. You get into teams, you go away with them, so you know you get that bond, that strong bond. And I think karate for me, when all around me is going wrong, has always been my place of solace. It's always been the safe haven. I go there to just shut away from everything. So, and the people around you, you'll find over the years, you can rely on them, and they're your family. They're your extended family. So that's what karate means to me. And I think there've been times throughout my life where I've maybe slowed down with karate and stepped away, but it always pulls me back. There's something that I'm deeply connected to it, so I keep getting pulled back to it.
You are what one would consider an entrepreneur. Can you explain to me how your creative business mind and Kyokushin have worked together?
Running my own business, or being an entrepreneur, as some would call it, and Kyokushin, I feel do go hand in hand with each other. I think the things you get taught in karate, where you know, going from a white belt going up to a black belt, you have to have tenacity, you have to have dedication, you have to have drive, you know, and going through the grading system and those ranks and things like that, where you might not get what you want, where you might not achieve what you thought you might initially achieve, you have to learn to take that and to carry on, to never give up, to strive for the best. And I think the ethos and the ideology of karate has really stood well for me in business, because when things have gone wrong, and more times than none it's gone wrong, or I feel like I want to give up, actually exactly like being on a knockdown mat where you think I can't do this, or I think that person might beat me, or I don't know if I can do it, and you just refer back to how you were brought up. And when you're brought up with karate, and when it's in your DNA like that, you then start to look at your life in other aspects and use that same ideology and that same ethos with everything you do.
Sounds brilliant. Could you translate that? What advice would you give to younger Darren Chan or any young person coming into Kyokushin, along the sides of what it gives you and how it can help their own business? What advice would you say to a younger version of yourself?
If I was to give advice to a younger Darren Chan, it would definitely be the moments that you were with yourself where you thought, you know, it's going wrong and you're doubting yourself. That's just part of life, and it's going to make you a better person. So you never fail, you just fall. When you make fall forward, you fall forward and it makes you a better person. So all the times that you didn't achieve what you wanted to achieve, you ended up looking at yourself a lot more and trying to change things. And when you look back on that, you think, actually, they were my biggest learning curves, and I actually became better because of it. So if I was to look back and tell a younger Darren Chan what to do or how you would cope with stuff, it would be, don't let pressure take over passion. Always keep the passion there. Don't let pressure overrule you. And that's something that Timmy and Paula Warden said to me, pressure over passion. And I think any entrepreneur, you know, anyone out there trying to start a business, just follow your heart. Just follow your heart and don't give up and take a chance. And I think with knockdown, karate, anyone competing, and I think with business, when you are there and you are all right to take a chance, or you want to take a chance, and you believe in yourself, and you think, right, and all around you might not believe in you. All around you might think, hey, I don't think you're going to do that. If you believe in yourself and you follow your heart, you're not going to go too wrong.
Fantastic advice. And with that advice, I've seen you following your passion, and you know, I've seen you connected to some high-profile athletes. Could you just give me a couple of background stories around your boxing training with David Hay, how you know George Groves? Expand on that.
Fortunately, because of the karate that I've done in the past, and following in the sort of in line with fitness and, you know, in gyms and stuff, I was lucky enough to meet, you know, some world-class athletes. David Hay, being one, George Groves, Andy Lee, and these were, you know, very high-profile athletes in terms of amateur that switched over to pro. And, you know, those that know David Hay and George Groves, Andy Lee, they all became world champions in their own right, as well as many other titles as well. In fact, David, two-weight world champion. Fortunately, because of, some would say maybe luck, I would say you make your own luck, but I got into contact, I met these guys when David was actually 19 when he first sort of came into my life, and I kept in contact with his trainer, his then trainer, and over a few years we'd come back into contact with each other, and the then trainer saw some of the methods that I was using in training, and what he liked was, although I boxed as well as a kid, and you know, I'd done kickboxing and stuff like that, he liked some of the strength and conditioning stuff I was doing. Actually liked the karate knockdown style of training and the conditioning, and was like, well, if you guys are taking kicks and punches without any gloves on and able to take that, how are these boxers getting hurt with gloves on? I want a bit of that. So I was like, okay, well, let's do some work together. So that's how that happened. And what happened then was where, again, with karate and would you say kata and stuff like that, I've always been a kid that you show me something a few times and I'm able to do it. Maybe not perfectly, but I'm able to follow instruction, and I'm a visual guy. And that really served me well in the boxing, because the trainer then, Adam Booth at the time, would show me a combination on the pads. And I think, again, from karate, you are told to do something, you do it. This is what you do, I want you to do that. And because I was good at that and just listened, I was able to follow the instruction with the pads. And I think, again, because of the karate and what you're taught, your body's in tune to, this is what I want you to do, okay, that's what I've got to do. And I was able to pick up his way of training the boxers, so much so he took me on as an assistant coach. And so whilst following my dream doing karate, going around the world doing that, I had another dream come true where I was then working with pro boxers, going around the world, and boxing is something I love watching anyway. So I followed that passion and was able to go around the world with those guys and be in their corners at MGM, Vegas, Madison Square Garden, you know, walk down those halls that Ali walked down and things like that into the ring. So it was nice.
Right, this is me, George Groves, former WBA super middleweight boxing champion, and I've come all the way to Venice in search of someone who could graft me as hard as Darren Chan, the man, the maestro, the fella who got me teak tough all them years ago, and I never forgot the lessons and brutality they put me through. He would let me punch him in the chest bare fist, as well as him try and punch me in the chest bare fist, but he was kind of hindered in that I'm twice his size and double hard, so it was impressive from him. I've always been a keen admirer of Darren. I love his old school meets new school method. His knowledge of the fight game is vast and brilliant, and he was perfect at adapting his qualities from mixed martial arts into my world, which was boxing. So he understood the fundamentals of boxing and what was required to get the best out of myself, and then would develop fantastic exercises that would partner those patterns of movement and strengths that is needed. So, message for you, Darren, you're the man, all the way from Venice.
Fantastic. Would you, just to elaborate on your travels around the world, have you ever in your life gone to Japan? Have you ever done any training over there? Is there any, have you been to that, any side of the world to perfect your skills?
Obviously doing karate and fighting for GB for a long time, I was given many opportunities to go around the world. And it was a perfect catalyst for travelling around the world. So, you know, at the time, Mum and Dad couldn't afford to take me around the world or anything like that, but karate served me well because it allowed me to do that, and that it was paid for as well, which is even better. Unfortunately, you know, there's many places that, you know, I wanted to fight. I was selected to fight in Japan a few times, but money and injuries actually prevented it. So I think 3 times I was maybe nearly going to Japan, and I always overtrained. Maybe going back, something I could tell a young Darren Chan is don't overtrain all the time. Less is more. And I was always getting injured. And what would happen was it would affect my training. So I was either injured on the mat or injured training for an event. And a couple of times I didn't happen to make the flight to Japan because I was just too injured. Which now, being retired, gutted about. So I think as a karate practitioner, you always want to go back to the home of where it's at, you know, Sosai Oyama and things like that, and visit those places that they've sort of done the karate and the histories come from. And when I look at my teammates and friends that have done that, I just sit there with admiration for them, but also a little bit of sadness that I never actually got to do that. So, never say never. Maybe not competing in Japan, maybe I'm a little bit too old for that. I don't know, there's veteran stuff now. But definitely it's on the agenda. It's definitely on the bucket list to go and do it. So, one day.
I wish you well, mate. I really do. And elaborating on the injuries, they're a significant part of most athletes' career. And it's very easy to get injured. I remember a major injury to the World Championship boxer David Hay, and you was in his corner. Can you elaborate on how that affects you as an elite athlete?
With obviously getting a lot of injuries with the training, I mean, and doing things like knockdown, where it is, some would say it's barbaric. You know, when you actually look at what knockdown is, you know, where you're hitting each other the way you do, your body's going to break down, and as you get older, it breaks down a lot more. At a younger age, I didn't really know how to cope with injuries. I didn't really listen. That's being young, and I think most young people don't. And you just carry on training. That's the thing you do, you just train. As I got older, I had to be a little bit more scientific with training, and working around the injuries, and I think having the teams around me that I had with the boxing and the fitness, I'd always be around people that knew a lot of advice, could give me advice and knew a lot of things like physios and osteopaths and stuff. So I started to learn more of this stuff about the aftercare, you know, the pre-season stuff, the importance of, you know, working your core, working this, working that, to then go out and perform. And I'm not saying karate doesn't give you that. In my experience and in my opinion, there was a lot of knowledgeable people in karate. What I found in my past is that someone gets a black belt and that instantly makes them someone that knows about rehab, someone knows about injuries, someone knows about this, someone knows about, and it's not always the right advice. So what I found is I was around specialists that are specialised in that field. So with all these injuries that I had, I started to learn a little bit more, which sent me into sports therapy. I actually started a degree in osteopathy, but that got blown out because of the karate stuff, so I couldn't do both. But I started to educate myself more in that. So I actually started to get better with training and not overtraining and injury prevention and rehab in my later career, my later life. So then when I started to work with the boxers, a lot of these guys and girls would just think about training and then wouldn't think about all the other aspects around it. And I found that because of my mistakes and because of the stuff that I went through, I was able to give them advice and point them in the right direction. Sadly, if you were to take someone like David, he's such an explosive athlete, you know, and I found that a lot of stuff that I was doing in my training, I was able to make that crossover with David and George Groves, Andy Lee, and show them a lot of stuff with the conditioning and things like that. But unfortunately, as I found myself, as you get older and you put your body through all of that training, you know, and you visit that well every time to go and fight, there's only so much the body can take.
This is David Haye, aka the Haymaker, former Cruiserweight Unified Champion, former Heavyweight Champion of the world. I want to give a big shout out to Darren Chan. Darren Chan actually started working on Team Haymaker many years ago, bringing an absolute beautiful new element to the table. You know, the freestyle karate world, you know, the Kyokushin teachings and trainings, intertwined it with the boxing, and it gave me a massive advantage over anybody else. And also Darren was a very good learner. He worked alongside some of the best coaches in the world and was able to absorb what they brought to the table. Not only that, they ended up taking a lot of the teachings, a lot of the training methods that he worked with me. They're now using those with their fighters. So Darren's a man. If you ever want to get yourself into some crazy condition, give him a shout.
You know, for instance, David, things happen without you knowing, and things that are just thrown at you. So if you remember, David Haye fought Tony Bellew, 02 Arena, 2017. His Achilles snapped during the fight. So one of the things that we're taught in Kyokushin, you know, you never give up, you carry on, the mental aspect of things. So I remember him coming back to the corner, and we actually thought he'd had a cramp. And he came back to the corner and he said, "No, my Achilles is gone." And I remember saying to him, "You've got the best head movement in the game, and you've got one or two options: you either stop or you go out and shield." And I think that's something that we're all taught in Kyokushin. If you're definitely competing, you go out and shield, you know. And so he did that. And I mean, anyone that remembered that fight, he did that. Now, I've called my business 8-7 Fitness, and it's after the Japanese proverb, fall down 7, get up 8. So that's a famous Japanese proverb about never giving up. And if you look at that, that is the epitome of never giving up, because the man had one leg and still didn't give up. And weirdly enough, I used to think it was just all about winning. I used to think about, people will give me praise if I go out and knock people out and win. If you just go out and fight and show you've got that heart as well, you can get a lot more praise. And it's about how you conduct yourself during that fight. And he found that, you know, he had things thrown at him when he had injuries before. He did that fight, unfortunately lost it, but the praise and admiration he got from the world from that, you know, was you know, madness. But again, it's that Kyokushin mentality. So
it's like the old adage, you learn more from defeat than you ever do in victory.
yeah, 100%.
With your fantastic all-round knowledge and obviously injury skills, have you ever thought of opening your own dojo?
With everything I've learned and these skill sets that I've been shown and you know, and attained over the years, for me, my karate journey and karate career has changed over the years. It's kind of been on the back burner for the last few years, and I haven't opened the dojo. I haven't really thought about what it is I want to do in terms of karate teaching just yet. Because my amateur boxing club's really sort of going off really well. And I think we're trying to rebuild that from the COVID side of things. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to start a dojo just yet, whilst I'm trying to focus on rebuilding that. and not spend the right time on any of it, sort of spread myself a bit too thin. There is going to be a point though where I do open a dojo. I do love teaching karate, and again, it's something that I just can't explain. It's the passion. This year I was asked to teach a seminar, and I did it, and I could have just stayed there for hours just teaching the seminar more and more and more and more, and the time went like that, and so that's just passion. And I think with the karate side of things, you know, like the boxing as well, you don't teach it for money, you teach it because you're passionate about it, and I want to do it because I'm passionate about it. So in answer to sort of those questions, I haven't opened the dojo just yet, but I am going to. That is definitely on the cards.
That's really great to hear, mate, because I think you're a fantastic instructor. But where can someone come and find you right now to get the knowledge that you have?
So we run a gym called 87 Fitness, again, play on the whole fall down 7, get up 8. And in that business, or under that umbrella, we've got an amateur boxing team. I think working with the pro boxers, we had amateurs coming in, and amateurs would turn over and becoming pro. And I really liked the journey from amateur to pro, them being kind of like a sponge, and you just try to help them create themselves, find their way, and then go on from there. I found a real passion in the amateur boxing, which is mad. When you look at my career, what I started out in, I've ended up teaching predominantly boxing now. And there is a crossover with, as I said, martial arts and the boxing, and I'm seeing that now. And the kids, you know, without blowing my trumpet, the kids and the adults that we've got are having success. And there's a lot of elements of karate that I'm bringing into their training. We've got a lot of kids coming through. And what I like is you've got a lot of kids from all walks of life. You've got kids that are in the foster care system. You've got kids that are, you know, who've got learning difficulties and stuff like that. And you're able to help and give back to those children. You work with the community as well. So we work with local police to get kids off the street. With the knife crime going through the roof, especially here where we are in South London, it's rife. So we're working with these teams of police and community support officers to try and get kids off the street, to try and give them a place to call a home from home, and to try and focus and direct them into something like I was, you know, put into something that gives them direction and purpose. So a lot of these kids that we have, there are adults as well, don't get me wrong, but we have a lot of children coming through. So a lot of these kids may not go on to become a world champion or become something big on TV or anything like that, but they will all go through a system where they feel safe, where they can get encouraged, where they can find that they get opportunities to travel the world. And that's really what I feel I was put on the earth to do. As I'm doing it and teaching it and being a coach, that's definitely where my passion is at.
Okay, my final question is from me. How do you rate 1Kyokushin? And what does Sammy and 1Kyokushin mean to you?
1Kyokushin and Sammy, who runs it, owns it, is in my eyes, it's a special thing. For instance, doing this. There's a lot of karate practitioners of yesteryear that just fly under the radar and they retire, and people, they may turn up at a tournament and someone says, oh, that person over there used to do something. You say, oh, does he? Did he? Did she? But I think with something like 1Kyokushin and social media now, I mean, I'm quite old, so I'm just getting used to social media. You're able to see people of the past, of what they've done, what they've achieved, and it stays in the memory banks. It's there. So for me personally, when my children are sort of looking at Dad hobbling through the house and, you know, not being able to walk properly from you know, all the training I've done, they're able to look back at things like this. I think in terms of, on the flip side, youngsters coming through, looking at stuff. I mean, I do it now. I can sit in the car when I finish work or sit having a coffee and I start looking at 1Kyokushin and I start seeing this guy or this girl that's won this, or this interview, or this training method. And it's something that can provoke more ideas with kids or people coming through the ranks going, oh, that's quite cool, I didn't know that. Oh, that's good. For instance, I just saw a lad, I can't think of his name now. I want to say DaCosta, it's not DaCosta. Sasha DaCosta, I think it is. Doing this Ashir Moshigiri, turned it into a Moshigiri, knocking someone out. And I've practiced that for the last week, trying to do that, based on what I saw on there. So it's something that can definitely give sort of more back to the generations coming up through, but also the people like myself that are now past it and old and like folkish, that, you know, we're remembered as well, which is equally nice.
Fantastic. Darren Chan, I thank you for the interview. I thank you for your service to Kyokushin, and I thank you for your entrepreneurship to make a difference in young children's lives.
Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure.
Is that cool?
Excellent.